What's up, guys? It's John from Springer Collectibles, and got another collector interview here for you today. I'm excited to introduce you guys. You've seen him on Whatnot. He goes by Finance Viper on Whatnot. Cool name, Finance Viper. We'll get into that too. I'm curious what the origin of that name is. We got Frank here. Frank
What's going
Zhang.
on, everybody? What's going on?
And Frank also is a seller on Whatnot as well, and a collector. He's got a heck of a collection there. Frank, I forgot, where are you from, by the way? Or where are you living now?
So I'm right now in Orlando, Florida, Disney World. That's why I keep saying Disney World.
Okay.
But I was born in China. I came to the United States in 1986. So I'm an 80s/90s kid. So that's definitely, I grew up in that era. So it's a big, toy boom, cartoon boom, cereal boom.
So you came in 86. Did you know about G.I. Joe before you came here?
Oh, no, dude. Like, at that time, China, it's not like today. China was still kind of far behind in terms of pretty much everything. After the technological era in the States, after I guess the Chinese government allowed people to have their own entities and whatever, China became much technologically advanced. But back in the day, we were pretty far behind as far as daily lives. And I was playing with, like, I'm not even exaggerating. I was like playing with dirt and shit like that. That's how bad it was.
So you remember the first time when you came here? What was the first toy you ever bought? Was it G.I. Joe?
Actually, no, I didn't have any G.I. Joes as a kid. So my dad and my mom, they didn't have. My dad came to the United States to study, and then he brought my mom and my brother and I over here, to try to give us a better life and whatever. So we were pretty poor. We were moving around a lot, trying to get cheap rentals and whatever. So I would say late 80s, much later, that I would receive my first G.I. Joe.
Do you remember what it was? Your first G.I. Joe?
Yeah, it was actually Leatherneck.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Giraffe Max or the first one?
The very first one.
Yeah, okay.
One. I remember I would like take his legs and bend like his ankles backwards and spread out his arm because I didn't have any vehicles. I was pretending he was like flying as like my little vehicle and stuff like that. So
nice. When did you turn it from just a few figures into the big collection we see behind you? How did that journey happen?
So one of the biggest issues, or I guess you could say obstacles, that I ran into as a kid was my parents were poor and they didn't buy us a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And my mom would do like odd jobs here and there, and she got a job with this dermatologist, and she had this little nephew that would always go over there and hang out with him when my mom would take me over to that house. And this kid had like every G.I. Joe, every Transformer, I kid you not, like literally everything. It was like, it made me so sad because I didn't have them there. But, once you go home, it was kind of like pretty sad, In many ways, my childhood was kind of like, I don't want to use the word deprived, but it was definitely limited. I think that's a better word. So I think that's what drove me to pretty much go apeshit when eBay came out, right? That's pretty much what everybody did. So once eBay came out, I was in college. I was buying things at flea markets, garage sales, you name it. Anywhere I can grab Joes, I would buy them. It became like this obsession.
Wow.
And everything was cheap. Everything was dirt cheap. I think on one of my streams, I showed that it was a $40 min in box complete hydrofoil at that time. That was like wild.
Were they just giving it away back then?
So 40.
What was that like? Yeah.
40 min in box would be like what? Today would be like about 100 something bucks, $160. I guess in the late 90s. But
I mean, that's amazing. You were buying that. So you just went on there and you're like, man, I'm like kind of making up for. I wanted this stuff so bad. Now I'm just gonna like start collecting it and keeping it in the box, opening it. What were you doing a little bit of both?
So I go to your stream pretty much every night. Springer.
Thanks.
Springer Collectibles on Whatnot for sure. I definitely check you out every night. And I think one of the things I said was I prefer 90s Joes. And the story behind that is because that's when I started buying Joes on my own when I was a kid. My parents started giving me, allowances. So I would go and buy G.I. Joes. And I kept them all like really nice, pristine condition. And I realized, you know what? I need to go back and collect the other ones from the older years that I was never able to obtain. So that's when I started just kind of go crazy. And then once you get into it, as everybody knows, you just kind of can't stop, And I wanted to go for the entire line. So I was pretty close. I was 6 figures away from the whole line complete. And I think the vehicles, I was missing the 4 big boys. It was the Flag, the Defiant, the Mobile Command Center, and of course the General. But I had everything else pretty much.
Wow. So did you never made it to the last 6 figures? You didn't end up completing?
No, because they were kind of more of the obscure characters. I think it was the Jinx, Cobra, convention stuff, and of course the Goat Head. That was that a lot of back in the days. People were really into collecting like the obscure stuff, so you don't really see them too often. At least I didn't really care too much about, it anyways. In the stream, I showed you that I have that create a Cobra that I bought for $1, and literally no one cared. It's insane. I know.
That's amazing. When did you buy that for $1? That's so amazing. That's
It was probably like I would say early 2000. This guy had a shop open in Gainesville, Florida. That's when I went to college, and I went to go check out a store.
so. How did you find out about Whatnot?
I learned about Whatnot because I went to a recent toy show about 2 months ago. Well, actually, about what 2 months ago now. So I met a
Wow.
guy. I bought some GI Joes from him, and he told me, "Dude, I started selling a Whatnot." I was like, "What is that? I never heard of it." And he's like, "It's a great site. You know, they do live auctions. It's very hard to scam people because everyone gets to witness what's being put up, and so you should have no
Yeah.
issues of what you receive." So I was like, "All right, I'll check that out." And then boom, started finding all the different Joe sellers, and I found you, and then realized you were doing it every night. So, I hit it up, and yeah, I remember that specifically, that you had a gun for Lifeline. I was like, wait a second, that's not the right gun. I was like, that's not the right gun. Either you're going to lose money or someone's going to gain money, or whatever the case was. And I thought that was part of the interaction. I just want to make sure everybody was, not getting the wrong item for what they're paying for. So,
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's also like the Joe Bros in the stream are always educating everyone, and I'm learning all the time new stuff. I've learned tons of stuff. Obviously, like like Punisher would always teach me everything since I started doing the streams. He would always point things out, what to talk about, what to look for, because I'm not a collector per se, so it's a different perspective for me. I loved the Joes as a kid, so because it was my favorite toy line. So yeah, I mean, anytime anyone drops knowledge, it's amazing, and a lot of people have given that feedback when guys like you share the knowledge. That's one of the cool things about being in the stream. Not even having to go there to bid and buy and all that. You can also just hang out and educate people on the hobby.
one of the reasons why I love GI Joe still to today. I was never in the military, but I always had a fascination with like guns and military terms. And that's why I
Yeah,
love GI Joe comics, because the writer was ex-military, so it was very realistic, and he used a lot of terms that I learned through that comic book. Actually, bottom all, when I was a kid, I kind of, like every kid in the 80s and 90s, we kind of progressed from the toys to the comics, and I own every single comic with the exception of issue 1 and issue 155, which was the last issue. But
huh?
now I want those graded just because I want to have a little bit piece of history for myself.
That's great. All right, so I see some great stuff behind you. Who are you army building right now? Looks like you do have some army builders there.
So yeah, I have definitely several armies that I'm working on, really, but I'm trying to concentrate on factions. My favorite faction, as you can see, is the Iron Grenadiers. I love these
Hmm.
guys. These are all the convention guys right
Okay.
there. So those are the convention exclusives from way back in the days. And up here are my Iron Grenadiers. So I'm trying to work on those more actively, but they're always popular. And I'm trying to pretty much work on like obscure Cobra troopers and
Okay.
maybe like Cobra Vipers. I don't really want to collect the OG stuff anymore because they're a little bit more pricier and not really worth building because they're more brittle at this point in time. And so for me, I'm going for more like the early 2000 Vipers and some of those reimagined troopers and stuff like that.
So early 2000s O-ring. Like what would be an example of like one of those you're looking to collect now?
Show you right here. This is definitely more of the obscure ones. This is from the, I believe, Toys R Us what's it called? Night Watch. These are
Okay.
basically reimagined troopers.
Nice.
Yeah, so these are custom guns that I bought from this company online, and so they look a lot better. Their quality of plastic is a little bit different, not necessarily worse, but not necessarily better, but they're usually not as bad in terms of having broken crotches, broken thumbs, because they're more softer plastic. So you
Sure.
shouldn't have to worry too much about broken thumbs at that point. That's one of the biggest reasons. At least I can put guns in their hands
Yeah.
and not have to worry about losing $50, $60 every time.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And also the O-rings are a lot newer. So yeah. And to answer your earlier question, yes, I only do O-rings. I don't do like the modern takes, the 25th anniversary and beyond. I don't do those.
So what else besides Joe's? What else do you collect?
Yeah, so I'm actually a pretty heavy collector. I guess since maybe few years ago, like I say 5 years ago, I became more of a heavier collector. So all these Joes that you see in the background, I dug them out of my boxes. I've been lugging those things around for like 20 years because those are the ones that never sold. With some of those, besides being added recently, most of those were lugged around for a while. I also collect Transformers, and I also
Okay.
collect Lego. That's like my favorite brand to collect because I think Lego is by far the best toy line of any brand, like period. Like I don't think any brand can compete with Lego.
Yeah.
And the background story on the Lego was, remember I was saying earlier about the dermatologist that my mom worked for. She was the nanny for her, and she was pretty wealthy, but she came from a very like hard upbringing. So she knew the value of money. She was one of those people that wouldn't just go and buy random things. And I remember she got me a gift, that doctor, and she bought me my very first Lego set. I still remember it till today, like a garage set where you can like fix cars and everything like that. It was I don't know what it was. It's just set something off in my inner childhood that I must buy Lego. So from then on, I've been collecting Lego since I think at that time was like 11 years old. I haven't stopped buying Lego ever.
Wow. You still build them now and everything?
Yeah, actually, my fiance, she is a huge supporter of me on Lego. So she has been buying me Lego set, like a big set every year for my birthday.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, she's great. So this year, it was the 90th anniversary of Lego, and they released the castle theme to celebrate that because us fans been asking it for years. Because Lego Castle has, I guess, essentially been like stopped since like the early 2000s or late, like mid 2000s. We've been wanting them to release more Lego sets for Castle for that duration of period. So they finally catered to our needs and they released a set. And I bought two, and they're huge. And I went to Disney Springs and went to the Lego store and bought them. And kids were just looking at me. He's like, man, he's walking around with some big old Lego sets, you know? I treated myself for sure on that one. But I have pretty much almost every vintage Lego set from the 80s, really working on trying to get the boxes for them because they're part of history. And
So when the Transformers, are you collecting mostly the vintage like G1 Transformers and
so G1 was actually a really huge part of my nostalgia as a kid. I actually had a few Transformers. My dad actually bought me some Transformers as a kid, and
okay.
I sold all of them except maybe 1%. I had about 250 complete G1 Transformers. But again, part of that process, you know, we needed money. We didn't have income coming. So I sold them all, or at least 99% of it. And I sold them all. I needed the cash. I raised enough money to make the move, you know, living for a few months and all that stuff. So we didn't have to worry about, you know, finding jobs and whatnot. So we're at Target, and then I saw some of the newer Transformers. They look great. And she's like, you know what? You can buy one. I was like, okay. So here we are, 7 years later. I have about 300 Transformers again. So but I did buy a lot of mainline Transformers, but now I'm in the process of selling all of those off. I'm buying Masterpiece line. I don't know if you're familiar, but basically they're the high end of the Transformers line. The Masterpiece is a brand for Transformers. I'm
right?
not sure if other brands had that word, but for Transformers is a specific brand.
Okay, I have to look that up. I'm not familiar with that. I thought about. Did want to get into Transformers as far as selling and whatnot because that was probably my second favorite toy line as a kid. It was He-Man, Transformers, GI Joe, pretty much, and Mask. Do you have any of the G1s left still, or did you keep any?
Yeah, actually, the one that I kept was the Seacons, which formed Piranacon. That was my favorite. I way overspent on that thing back in the day, so I realized if I sell in right to the current market, I will lose money. So I decided just to keep it. So
That's
that was
good.
yeah. So I was like, yeah, I love that piece, so I was willing to keep it for life.
Back to the Joes real quick. Time for the quick kick round. We're going to ask Frank some quick questions about GI Joe, his collection. Favorite Joe or Cobra?
Favorite Joe or Cobra. So I'm gonna give you both then. My favorite Joe has always been Shockwave.
Nice.
I love Shockwave because he was a SWAT guy. I just had a factuation with anything with masks for some weird reason. Anything body with a face covering, that was my favorite.
That is definitely one of the coolest figures that they made in the line for sure. All right, so favorite Cobra then.
Cobra, surprisingly, everybody probably has like Coco or Firefly. Mine is actually the Range Viper. He had the weirdest face when I was a kid. He had the like a skull mask as a
Yeah.
helmet, and I was like, Yeah, that's all me. I'm totally gonna be a range viper when I grow up. So
Most overrated.
most overrated, like both, one of each.
Like, sure, what? Yeah, why not? Yeah, most overrated GI Joe figure.
I think the most overrated GI Joe figure is Snake Eyes, and I'm probably gonna get some lashback on this. But growing up as a kid, he was my favorite Joe. Shockwave is my favorite Joe today. So I think the reason why I think he's overrated is because in the comic books, they pretty much made him into this like a godly fighter where no one can touch him. And I think that's what created the myth and the legend about, Snake Eyes, that he's pretty much untouchable. But they did make a continuation of the storyline after the 155th issue, which I will not spoil it for you. But, you know,
Okay.
Snake Eyes definitely has a story that is very impactful later on if you want to read those comics. But yeah, I think Snake Eyes is overrated because pretty much every kid grew up loving ninjas. The 80s, 90s was like a huge
Yeah.
issue in ninjas. So today I feel like he's overrated. Yes.
All right, good answer. I like it. And then most overrated Cobra.
I think the most overrated Cobra is probably Firefly. I know a lot of people love Zartan, but I actually really enjoy Zartan. I didn't really love him, but I enjoyed him. But I think Firefly is overrated because he's just a saboteur. And I think they made Firefly into like this super badass, especially in the comics, because they revealed way more than they needed to build his origin and his background. And if you read the comic books, you're gonna probably realize why I say it, because they kind of started developing this crazy mythos on him. For me, that didn't make any sense, and that's why I think he was also blown up like Snake Eyes, like a little overrated. Yeah.
I like these answers because I'm thinking of them in the context of the figures, like who's a popular, but you're taking it a step further and adding the comic into it. So that's pretty cool. Ironically, Firefly is probably Firefly Zartan, probably my top two favorites, but I haven't read the comic either. So just from a standpoint of nostalgia, Firefly really stood out to me, and Zartan, like, and even Torpedo. I feel like Torpedo is one of my first ones that I really remember. But yeah, Firefly is just a cool figure mold, but I see you're taking it a step further and looking at the comic also. Um,
Actually, I agree with you there. I'm going to take a step further. If you want to ask me figures, yes, Firefly is actually my favorite because again, he looked like a ninja. I didn't pick
yeah,
Storm Shadow because again, I think he's also overrated. But I love Firefly because I love sabotaging. I do that in your stream sometimes. Not to sabotage you per se. Sometimes inadvertent. So that I do apologize if it's inadvertent sabotage.
that's really the most overrated. One of my favorite categories I talk about for the figures is most underrated. I always bring up stuff from, I feel like 1990 is a big underrated. There's a lot of underrated figures in that line. Like Captain Gridiron and Bullhorn is underrated figures. Do you have underrated figures that you would say this guy should be more popular? This should be more, people should collect them more? Any figures like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like we're talking about in terms of figures, I would definitely say Desert Scorpion. In fact, Desert
Oh,
Scorpion probably wasn't one of those guys people wanted back in the days. I remember he was dirt cheap. You couldn't like sell him. Like Alley Viper
ah,
was always expensive, but Desert Scorpion wasn't expensive. And you could buy like tons of them if you wanted to. Now I was on the same bandwagon. Nobody wanted them. It's like they're cheap. And I
huh.
think now everybody wants him. That's why you can see the reflection in his prices. 100% complete, $75 loose. That's
Yeah.
pretty insane to me. He was easy to get like back in the days.
Wow.
Easy.
I feel like he's impossible now, but there you go, because no one wants to sell him. And if they are, they're selling him pretty high. All right, how about one of my favorite questions is it's the hardest question to answer. I feel like there's not even a right answer, but what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite year of the line? Do you have a favorite year of the line?
Ooh, that's pretty tough. I'm a huge fan of the Bats, the original Bats, Vipers, Crimson Guards, but I actually don't want to do 86.
Okay.
I'm thinking I'm doing the year of the Range Viper, simply because that was the year that they had like Big Ben, which I love. I really
Mm,
love Big Ben, the way
okay.
he was created, his accessories. I would say 89 or 90 is probably my favorite because that was around the time where I believe Hasbro needed to compete against the Turtles, because the Turtles all had like fun and goofy accessories. So I think Hasbro had to step up their game by adding like literally 1,000 accessories for each figure. And I think that's when you're a kid, you love that. You love the fact that they had so many little things that comes with them.
That's a good answer. Yeah, 1990 is Range Viper, by the way. 19 Range Vipers, 1990. And I did notice that recently when we were like looking at the lines, and I always kind of ignored 89, 90, but 89 had so many Vipers, and then 90 had, like you said, just incredible accessories for these guys. So that's a good. I like that answer. How about favorite vehicle or playset or both?
All right, now we're getting into the good stuff. Favorite vehicle or playset. I think Terradrome is definitely up there. But if you're asking me today what my favorite is, I have to say the Cobra Hammerhead. It has the neon colors, which
Yeah.
to some people is a turn off, but I love anything that has detachable vehicles. I've always find that to be fascinating, both as a child and as an adult, because it was just such a well-designed vehicle for playability wise, and also just as an adult to kind of display wise. I think that's definitely my opinion. Was it six in one vehicle,
Wow.
and it was just a cool concept the way they designed it. I love water things and I love flying things. Those are like my two favorites.
And the driver for that is badass too. The
Yeah, he's a
Decimator.
little he's a little over the top in design, but yeah, he's pretty well designed in terms of the actual uniform. I just don't enjoy the colors, but yeah, the design was excellent.
Is
Yes.
there a reason that one seems so hard to get other than collectors aren't selling them? Like I never see that figure. It seems so rare to me to get him.
I think it's because of the accessories. That weapon is probably always lost, and then helmet is kind of hideous. So I think a lot of the time is people just don't want to sell it because it's a little bit more unique than the others in terms of design. That's my opinion, anyways. I don't really know the actual reason why it's more quote unquote rare. The later years, a lot of the stuff became there were probably less in the wild anyway, simply because the line was kind of dying towards the 90s, and that one I believe came out in 91, if I'm not mistaken, 90 or 91. Now you can correct me on that, but I think during that time, a lot of kids probably moved on to comic books and things like that. So you probably didn't have too much sales, in my opinion, and then maybe a lot of it got destroyed or whatever. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it seems like the 90s stuff, it's almost like harder to find, ironically, like on eBay and things. Maybe it was just more overproduced in the 80s, like certain things, not all. Like just finding 94s and vehicles from the 90s, I feel like it's not as there's many of them out there. Like when I'm always searching for lots and things.
Yeah, exactly. You don't. I think since I came back collecting, I only bought two, and I would have bought 50 of them if I could.
Yeah.
One of the probably you touch up a lot of good things about can finding, like for example, like what a 93 alley viper, that thing is like $100, crazy,
Yeah.
$200 minute card. I think it's because a lot of people are hoarding them. I was watching this one guy on Facebook group, which I recently have been doing that. This guy had like 20 of them.
Where are you finding most of your, well, I guess now recently you started getting back into it, so I guess are you finding everything through Whatnot, through other collectors, through eBay, kind of stuff?
Yeah, for me, I do right now. I think shying away from eBay, not because they don't have the supply, it's more like because dealing with bad sellers. I
Okay.
bought several lots, and people are sending me broken stuff, and they claim they didn't, and so it just got really obnoxious.
Wow.
So I just tried to really look on Macari. There's usually a lot of good deals. If you're scanning 24 hours, you can pretty much get like killer deals, like
Wow.
pre-COVID prices.
Wow.
And then you can also get really good deals, obviously, on Whatnot. I don't want to say the word steals anymore because the market is heavily inflated at this point.
Right.
Down, but I definitely think the common items are going to come down drastically. The more obscure stuff will probably remain a little bit high than normal, but I think everybody expects that.
Like Mickey Mouse Coco and things like that are more rare. Do you have a Mickey Coco in your collection?
That wasn't really a huge deal. I knew about it, but I never cared. Like I said, during that era of collecting, that first giant wave of collecting for many of us hoarders, we didn't really think too much on those things. Some people definitely cashed in on them because they were thinking way farther ahead than I was.
Hmm.
If I'd known, obviously, I would have picked up 10,000 Creative Cobras, 5,000 Mickey Cocos. I'm one of those hoarder guys. I don't look at it as an investment from a money perspective. I
Okay.
look at more like I just want them to hoard, you know.
Huh. Tell me about the vehicle. I know we're gonna probably do the videos, but can you talk about the boxed vehicles you have up there? It looks like a Hurricane back there. Is that the
Yes,
right?
that's a box hurricane. That's actually, like I said, that's my favorite plane now. I think it started everything with the Night Raven that I wanted to buy, but the Hurricane was actually one of the vehicles I never owned, like ever. So It was a bit pricey back in the days too, and I didn't really like the design. And I was actually progressing from the early 80s to the later 80s and 90s in terms of vehicle loose collecting. And I was reversing that on mint on card because simply it was cheaper to reverse it mint on card, but it was cheaper to go from the early 80s to the 90s. So Hurricane I never made to it that far by the time I was collecting stuff. So Hurricane I never owned. My favorite plane, I bought it mint in box. I love that thing. I just love the design. I think it's one of the best looking planes nowadays. And then
Yeah.
I'm working on basically collecting all the Cobra vehicles in boxes and essentially avoiding all the Joe vehicles. So that's my little baby plan right there.
All right. So your goal right now is to get all the 82 through 94 Cobra vehicles boxed.
Actually, no, I'm completely skipping the early 80s.
Okay.
For example, like 82, 83, no, none of those in box because they're all, they're people call them green men, right? Like that's how the GI Joe started. And Cobra was all blue, the blue men, green men versus blue men. Everything was the same color scheme. Wasn't a huge fan of design of the Fang, any of those things. So definitely not going that back. I'm probably just going to go back to, I would say 86, maybe 85 if there's a couple of vehicles that I like.
Why do you think collectors like this? Is more of a, I was thinking about asking some questions about collector psychology. Like the other day, I was listening to Michael Mercer. Do you know that one channel?
Michael Mercy.
Mercy. And his topic was like, when is collecting enough, or when do you say when, or when do you stop collecting like a certain line? And it was a great question. It almost like stumped the guys that were on there. Like, I don't know. Like they just could, it was a hard question because there's psychology to it, And like, what do you think the psychology behind, it doesn't have to be psychology. Why the box? Like, unless you're collecting it to hold it because it's more valuable, why do you, I'm curious, this might be a new thing I started asking. Why do you think collectors like to keep it in the box other than value?
I think for me, I actually, you know what? That's a great topic, to be honest. Like the psychology aspect of collecting. Like
Okay.
I have a pretty solid rationale behind all of that. So my thing is I look at this. If you're a collector and you have a lot of money, right? Collecting is not fun. You can just go on any website and say bye 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 bye, and then you're essentially done, right? So you need to have a chase. There has to be some sort of chasing element. It's like dating. When you're first dating your wife, we both had this honeymoon phase. So you love each other in terms of like touching each other all the time, being together all the time, meet to go everywhere together all the time.
Yeah.
It makes you feel really great about yourself. And I think that's part of collecting. You're always after something. And one of the problems with GI Joe, O-Ring, a real American Hero line, is they no longer make them. So we don't really have a chase. There's nothing we're anticipating that's being released. So what we're doing for ourselves is you want to create something that you're chasing. So now you have all these loose figures, you have all these loose vehicles. I need to create something out of this entity. You need to create a new entity. So, okay, why don't we start now collecting mint in box? And maybe you graduate to mint in sealed box. Maybe you'll army build steel brigades like Woods does. So, you're creating little mini games for yourself to perpetuate and further your love for the line.
They kind of mentioned that too in that interview. They were saying that pace is more fun than once you get it, and finding it is the exciting part. And then after that, it's like, okay, I have it. So that's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's like a
Mhm.
roller coaster, honestly. Like you get that high when you're like looking for it and you finally get it, then it's such a huge low. Like I got that Hurricane. I was after it for a very long time. Finally got a really nice copy. And then it's just like, okay, now I'm just sitting on my shelf.
Wow.
Now what?
They're right. Exactly. The psychology, this really is a thing. Like that really could be a big topic. I thought about that. I'm like, how do I ask questions about that? Like it's hard because it's the mindset of the collector. Like before I started doing this, I didn't know that people just had entire rooms dedicated to a toy line. And then when I realized it, I'm like, okay, that's a lot of people have that and they've had it for a long time. And it's not new. And what is that? There's like a thin line between that. It's like a museum kind of thing and appreciation for the line. And then there's the thin line between starting to hoard stuff too. So it's an interesting psychology. It really is. Like it's hard to even ask the question because I'm not even sure how that mindset, but it's there. It's very common too. You see a lot of people collecting a lot of different things, and not even just action figures. It could be anything. It could be like little porcelain dolls or something, you know?
Just because we're naturally as humans we want shiny things, right? We're like goblins. Literally, we're like goblins. We like shiny things. We want to hoard things because we want to validate our existence. I know
Okay.
I'm going really freaking deep right there, but
No,
I think
you
part of
got it.
it that is yeah, I think part of that is our mentality as humans. We want to leave something behind, or while we're here, we want to enjoy as much as possible. It's kind of overindulging. That also has to do with why people army build, because it's no end in sight. You just keep going.
Do you think a part of it is also like being able to show your collection to other collectors and being proud of it, or being or flexing, or whatever? Not like in an arrogant way, but like a wow, Frank has 50 Vipers or whatever it is. Do you think that's part of it too? Like just being able to flex or show your collection. Like what's the if you can't show it to people or talk about it or have people say wow, like there's only so much enjoyment you get out of it. Do you think it's also the enjoyment you get out of other people, sharing that with other people, other collectors?
That's a really solid question, and I hate to be that one guy on your show to be controversial, but I'm going to do it anyways because I'm a controversial guy, right?
Okay.
So here's the thing. Here's how I'm looking at all of this. I personally don't feel like we as like collectors, like first and foremost, I think we're all nerds and geeks in that way because that's how society labels us, right? We're like the antisocial types who collect action figures. But and I think that's part of your motivation to do this series, that there's so many people from all walks of life collecting things. To really, what's the psychology behind the collecting aspect, like we talked about earlier? And part of it is because, again, people want to have validation, some sort of maybe recognition. I think that's the better word, from other people. I think when we collect something and you join a group where other people does the same or do the same thing as you, you want to start validating yourself as someone to other people. You want other people to recognize you. Maybe you had a tough childhood. Maybe you were bullied when you were a kid. All these different psychological factors can contribute to why you're collecting and perhaps why you're actually flexing to others. For
Yeah.
me, I don't really treat it as flexing. I know there's way more people with way more money, way more accessibility, way more room, whatever. It's endless. I learned this years ago that you cannot compete in the world where there's billions of us. There's always somebody better than you in one shape or another, right? In the Joe world, you see that all the time. Like people are flexing so hard. I think part of the psychology in our society, and maybe others as well, is that media wants us to spend money. Media wants to create a consumer's market. So they want us to be in debt. They want us to spend money on things that we don't need. And that's why you see like commercials like expensive cars and expensive brands of cologne and watches
Yeah.
and stuff like that, because they want you to spend so that you can show off that you have money. But in actuality, the people who have money, they're the ones that are actually not flexing at all because they have a lot of money and they don't care.
One thing I kept thinking that might be is I think there's this like feeling that maybe you guys can explain better that you get when you have the figures that you can go back and look at. There's some kind of weird, it brings the kid out of you, kind of actual real feeling that happens when you connect with those toys. Does that sound crazy?
No, I think that's legit because you mentioned earlier that your favorite was Torpedo. So I hear that your favorite growing up as a kid, character wise, was Torpedo. So I'm pretty sure every time you sell a Torpedo, something's triggering in your brain that some kind of nostalgia just comes back to you. Like when I walk my dog, sometimes I just have this weird nostalgia. Like I feel like I'm in the '80s walking down this specific street with the sun going a certain way and the wind hitting my face in a certain way, and I feel like I'm actually in the '80s. I don't know. It's weird to explain.
That's amazing.
But
No,
I feel
that's
that
cool.
way with my figures sometimes.
Yeah, like I remember I took all my old He-Man figures out for my son, and I'm picking them up, and all of a sudden you get this weird feeling like you're like 6 or 7 again. I can't explain the feeling, the smell, the whatever it is. It's like you're brought back into that world for a second. I cannot describe what that is at all, but there's something there. And I wonder if that's also part of the collecting thing too, at least at first.
Yeah, for sure. I agree 100%. I think you hit it on the head there. I think everyone has some sort of nostalgia factor. But for me, most of those factors are gone. That's why I don't collect G1 Transformers. That's why I don't really go in army build or buy certain characters anymore in vintage. I think I'm more going towards aesthetically pleasing things. That's why I'm really into the classified line because they look great to me. And I always felt like that's the way G.I. Joe should have been, how they
Yeah.
should have been designed if they were real life.
You kind of built upon the nostalgia and took it to a new level of appreciation of the line. That's why I found Woodstocker's situation be so unique because she didn't play with him as a kid and still loves it. So there's definitely different layers, like I was saying before, the psychology to collecting. Because she's only been doing it 2 years, and she just found something that she thought was fun and quirky and interesting. And I can see how, I definitely see how people could get. You start with, I always joke, I'm gonna have one shelf of, and you start small probably, right? And then it just blows up from there. You think like you can stop, and then you just keep going and going.
Yeah, I think a lot of people openly state that they have budgets. A lot of people openly state that they don't collect vehicles, in your
Yeah.
stream, other streams. So people are at least are financially responsible. But there are, I'm afraid, people like me when I was younger, that you're buying things on credit, you're not paying it off on time. So if you're gonna talk about value, you're losing money. And I think that's partially why when I joined Whatnot, I named myself Finance Viper. That's pretty much the background story behind it.
I was going to ask you tell me about the origin of what does Finance Viper mean? Because when I heard that, when I first read it, you make all these assumptions about people's screen names. I was like, a stockbroker or just a banker or something like that, but also likes to collect Joes. But tell me about the name Finance Viper, where that came from.
So I decided to kind of join as a Joe guy, right? I didn't know what the communities were like on the app. So I decided to go with the name of Joe guy, basically. And I thought about it. The last 5 years, you could say I've financially kind of like blossomed. Not like I didn't get rich or anything, but like financially blossomed in terms of adulting, like pretty hardcore adulting. And we finally started working as professionals. I actually work in the medical field, as I mentioned before, and so does my future wife. And so for us, we are becoming more in tune with making sure we're financially free, financially stable.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I started learning from my friend a lot about finances and about the psychology, like you mentioned, which is very cool that you brought that up because there is psychology behind it. As I mentioned before, our society tried to dictate certain things onto us. They try to push on things onto us. I don't like to use the word brainwashing, but it kind of is. And so in that sense, I'm like essentially we're deviating away from your normal, hey, go to college, get a job, and just basically, live quote unquote normal life, invest in your 401k and hopefully you can retire. We don't think like that anymore. We have to think outside the box. So
yeah, this has been fun. I wish we could keep chatting about it, but thanks for doing this, by the way. And
yeah, I wanting to do this with me because I thought about it. Maybe I just like pass on it and just have other people since I've been like selling myself on the streams about showing my collection of this and that on Instagram and stuff like that. But I think having a face to face and actually like communicating finally in terms of like talking to each other, it makes it that much easier to communicate, and for people to watch this, I think it's a lot easier for them to understand truly where I'm coming from since you're asking these really solid questions to me.
well, no, I appreciate that. And
So
I know the guys will be really excited to see this, and they'll be excited to see your collection too, no doubt. Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much, Frank. I appreciate your time.
all right, brother. Yeah,
This is
man.
fun.
I appreciate you, man, for doing this too.
Absolutely. Well, thanks. I hope to see you in the stream soon.
Okay, man. Take care, dude.
See you.